Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarini. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shiva Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anybody listening? Okay. So today we're going to talk about cows. And we'll start with Srimad Bhagvatam, first canto, chapter 16, and verse number 18. Srimad Bhagvatam, chapter 16, verse number 18. And this verse says, the personality of religious principles, Dharma, was wandering about in the form of a bull, and he met the personality of earth in the form of a cow, who appeared to grieve like a mother who had lost her child. She had tears in her eyes, and the beauty of her body was lost. Thus Dharma questioned the earth as follows, purport by Srila Prabhupada. The bull is the emblem of moral principle. And the cow is the representative of the earth. When the bull and the cow are in a joyful mood, it is to be understood that the people of the world are also in a joyful mood. The reason is that the bull helps production of grains in the agricultural field, and the cow delivers milk, the miracle aggregate food values, the miracle of aggregate food values. The human society, therefore, maintains these two important animals very carefully so that they can wander everywhere in cheerfulness. But at the present moment, in this age of Kali, both the bull and the cow are now being slaughtered and eaten up as foodstuff by a class of men who do not know the Brahminical culture. The bull and the cow can be protected for the good of all human society simply by spreading of Brahminical culture as the topmost perfection of all cultural affairs. By advancement of such culture, the morale of society is properly maintained, and so peace and prosperity are also attained without extraneous effort. When Brahminical culture deteriorates, the cow and bull are mistreated, and the resultant actions are prominent by the following symptoms. Okay, so here we have a lot of precious information about the cow and the bull. The bull represents the moral principles of life, or Dharma. And the cow is the representative of the earth. So when they're both happy, it's to be understood that the people of the world are also in a joyful mood. So, now, if you tell this to normal people in the United States, a lot of them would just laugh and say, oh, that's all superstition. But it's not superstition, it's a fact. The whole, and we can see that in the happiest place of all places is Goloka Vrindavan, where everyone is living happily, peacefully, and loving relationships with Krishna, and the cows are very prominent there. Cows and bulls are very prominent. So even when Krishna was having his pastimes in this world, in the material world, his father, Nanda Maharaj, had 900,000 cows. So one time, a devotee, an initiated devotee, he asked a question. He said, if Nanda Maharaj had 900,000 cows, what did he do with all the poop? No, he said, yeah. And Krishna was taking care of them. What did they do with all the poop and the pee? It seems to be a daunting, impossible endeavor, handling all that poop. So what's the answer to that? Well, the answer is Krishna is holding all the planets in exact orbits, and there's millions and billions of planets in only one universe, and there are billions of universes. And guess who's managing all that? It's Krishna himself. So if he can manage so many planets and so much exact movements of the planets in their orbits, why can't he also handle the poop of 900,000 cows, you see? Because Krishna has multiple and infinite powers. Parasya Shakti Vividaiva Shriyate. Swabhaviki Jnanabala Kriyacha. So, therefore, we should not underestimate the power of Krishna. The poop of 900,000 cows is nothing for Krishna. Just imagine the size of the sun, the size of Juniper, the size of the earth, and all these planets. And this is only one little galaxy, and he's holding all these planets, hundreds and millions of planets, in perfect orbits. So he can also handle the poop of 900,000 cows. So, why is it understood that everyone will be happy if the cows and bulls are happy? And you notice it says that if they're allowed to roam around freely, so cows and bulls, they like to roam around. They don't want to be cooped up in a barn all day long. They like to move around, especially when the weather is nice. They can stay in rain also, but they don't like it too much. They prefer, temperate weather. So, the reason is everyone will be happy and in a joyful mood is that the bull helps to produce grains, and the cow gives perfect food, which is milk. So therefore, if you have cows that give milk and bulls that help grow the grains, that's it. Your food problems are over. The real nutrition that we get is mostly from grains and milk. And then fruits, vegetables, and lentils and nuts, they also help. But even if you never had those things, if you just had grains and milk, you would be able to live and be nourished completely. Okay, so therefore, human society maintains these two important animals very carefully, the bull and the cow, so that they can wander everywhere in cheerfulness. But at the present moment in this age of Kali, both the bull and cow are now being slaughtered and eaten up as foodstuff by a class of men who do not know Brahminical culture. So in order to have Brahminical culture, you also need cows and bulls. and they should be protected. The bull and cow can be protected for the good of all human society simply by the spreading of Brahminical culture as the topmost perfection of all cultural affairs. So, what is the Brahminical culture? Well, if we look at Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, Samadamak tapak socham santirajvamevacha jnanam viganam sahitam yajgadva brahma karma swabhavajam. So, when we say, okay, that's 18th chapter, 44th verse. Let's take a look at it. It says, actually, it's not the 44th verse. It is the 42nd verse. Brahminical culture, 1842. Brahmanas, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Sudras, Samadamak tapak socham shantirajavamevacha. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So that's Brahminical culture, all these things. And each one of those points can be further elaborated by other important qualities. So in Srimad Bhagvatam, Srimad Bhagvatam also explains first canto, second chapter, 20th verse. First canto, second chapter, 20th verse. Let's take a look at that. 1, 2, 20. So this verse, it says, 1, 2, 20. So, evam prasana manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. So, thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. So this is one of the important verses that we recite every day. And it says in the purport, in the Bhagavad Gita 7.3, it is said that out of many thousands of ordinary men, one fortunate man endeavors for perfection in life. Mostly, men, meaning people, are conducted by the modes of passion and ignorance. And thus they are engaged always in lust, desire, hankerings, ignorance, and sleep. Out of many such man-like animals, there is actually a man who knows the responsibility of human life and thus tries to make life perfect by following the prescribed duties. Okay, those prescribed duties, or following the prescribed duties, is called dharma, or occupational. So dharma, the actual definition of it is following prescribed duties. Or occupational duties. So you have occupational duties for Brahmanas, occupational duties for Kshatriyas, occupational duties for Vaishyas, and occupational duties for Sudras. So, and out of many thousands of such persons who have thus attained success in human life, one may know scientifically about the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Okay, so in the same Bhagavad Gita, 1855, it is also said that scientific knowledge of Sri Krishna is understood only by the process of devotional service, bhakti yoga. The very same thing is confirmed herein in the above words. No ordinary man, or even one who has attained success in human life, can know scientifically or perfectly the personality of Godhead. Perfection of human life is attained when one can understand that he is not the product of matter, but is in fact spirit. And as soon as one understands that he has nothing to do with matter, he at once ceases his material hankerings and becomes enlivened as a spiritual being. This attainment of success is possible when one is above the modes of passion and ignorance. Or, in other words, when one is actually a Brahmana by qualification. A Brahmana is the symbol of sattva guna, or the mode of goodness, And others who are not in the mode of goodness are either Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, or less than Sudras. The Brahmanical stage is the highest stage of human life because of its good qualities. So one cannot be a devotee unless one at least qualifies as a Brahmana. The devotee is already a Brahmana by action, but that is not the end of it. As referred to above, such a Brahmana has to become a Vaishnava. In fact, to be actually in the transcendental stage. A pure Vaishnava is a liberated soul and is transcendental even to the position of a Brahmana. In the material stage, even a Brahmana is also a conditioned soul. Because although in the Brahmanical stage the conception of Brahman or transcendence is realized, scientific knowledge of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so let me read this sentence again. A pure Vaishnava is a liberated soul and is transcendental even to the position of a Brahmana, period. In the material stage, even a Brahmana is also a conditioned soul, because although in the Brahmanical stage the conception of Brahman or transcendence is realized, scientific knowledge of the Supreme Lord is lacking. Okay, so what is the difference then? So your first homework for next week is explain the difference between a Brahmana and a Vaishnava. Because even in Seattle you'll see there are many Brahmanas, not only in this temple but in other temples. But there is a, let's say, noticeable difference between a Brahmana and a real Vaishnava. One has to surpass the Brahmanical stage and reach the Vasudeva stage, or understand the personality of Godhead Krishna. The science of the personality of Godhead is the subject matter for study by the postgraduate students in the spiritual line. Foolish men or men with a poor fund of knowledge do not understand the Supreme Lord, and they interpret Krishna according to their respective whims. The fact is, however, that one cannot understand the science of the personality of Godhead unless one is freed from the contamination of the material modes, even up to the stage of a Brahmana. When a qualified Brahmana factually becomes a Vaishnava, in the enlivened state of liberation, he can know what is actually the personality of Godhead. Okay, so you have your first homework for next week. Know the difference between a Brahmana and a Vaishnava, and that's explained here and in other places. We'll look at that also. So then, but our subject today is cows, right? So to do your homework, you have to read 1-20 and 1-21. Okay, so protecting cows and bulls is related very closely to maintaining Brahminical culture in society. That's why the cow is so important, because the cow gives the liquid form of religion called milk. And milk is churned, milk and cream is churned into butter, and the butter is made into ghee, and the ghee is necessary for performing all Vedic sacrifices. Okay, so that was first chapter, first canto, second chapter, verses 20 and 21. Okay, now we're going to go to the first canto, 12th chapter, verse 34. And what does that say? Let's see. Verse 34, 33. In that verse, it's talking about at the last paragraph of the last two paragraphs of that long purport. It talks about horse and cow sacrifice, and it says the horse sacrifice yagya or cow sacrifice yagya, which were performed before Kali Yuga in the Dwapara Yuga and previous yugas, there were such things as horse sacrifices and cow sacrifice. These sacrifices were performed by Vedic regulations, but they shouldn't be misunderstood as a process of killing animals. On the contrary, animals offered for the yajna were rejuvenated to a new span of life by the transcendental power of chanting the Vedic hymns or Vedic mantras, which, if properly chanted, are different from what is understood by common laymen. The Veda mantras are all practical, and the proof is rejuvenation of the sacrificed animal. However, there is no possibility of such methodical chanting of the Vedic hymns by the so-called Brahmanas or priests of the present age. The untrained descendants of the twice-born families are no more like their forefathers, and thus they are counted amongst the Sudras, or once-born men. That means that all the Brahmanas in Kali Yuga are considered Sudras, because the Garbhodhan samskara is usually not performed by the Brahmana mother and father. What is the Garbhodhan samskara? It's a whole ceremony in preparation for conceiving a child, and it's all based on self-purification. And most people don't follow that today. So therefore, it's considered that everyone born in Kali Yuga is actually a Sudra because of not following the Garbhodhan samskara ceremony. There is no possibility of such methodical chanting of the Vedic hymns by the so-called Brahmanas or priests of the present age. The untrained descendants of the twice-born families, when it says twice-born families, that means that families in which one takes a seminal birth by mother and father and then takes a spiritual birth by initiation of a bona fide spiritual master. So therefore they're called twice-born families. The untrained descendants of the twice-born families are no more like their forefathers, and thus they are counted amongst the Sudras, or once-born men. The once-born man is unfit to chant the Vedic hymns, and therefore there is no practical utility of chanting the original hymns. And to save them all, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu propounded the Sankirtan movement, or yajna, for all practical purposes, and the people of the present age are strongly recommended to follow the sure and recommended path. So in other words, one can achieve the position of becoming a bona fide Brahmana, and even better, a pure Vaishnava, by chanting Hare Krishna. And there are no real pure Brahmanas in the sage. But why? Because the Garbhadan Samskar is not performed, and other preparatory functions before child conception. However, regardless of the fact that most people in this age are Sudras or lower, like Chandalas and Malechas and Yavanas, still by chanting Hare Krishna and associating with pure devotees, one can become properly trained and assume the position of a Brahmana and eventually a pure Vaishnava and even a guru or bona fide spiritual master. Okay, then, so that was 1:12:34. Now we're going to look at 1:10:4. First canto, 10th chapter, verse number 4. Now, this says, it says, during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. That means there was enough for everybody. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. So, not only there were so many cows, but the cows had very fatty milk bags, and the milk bags were filled with nutritious milk. And there was so much milk that they would wet the ground with this milk and basically fertilize it. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, the basic principle of economic development is centered on land and cows. Now, if you talk to a modern economist and you say this, most of them would disagree. They would say, no. Economic development depends on supply chain, factories, machinery, investment, and research, and scientific advancement, and so forth. But here it says the basic principle of economic development is centered on land and cows. The necessities of a human society are food grains, fruits, milk, minerals, clothing, wood, etc. Well, these are all things that are natural. There are no machines involved, and there are no factories. There is, however, seeds, rain, and sun. And you get food grains, fruits, milk, minerals, clothing, wood, etc. One requires all these items to fulfill the material needs of the body. Certainly one does not require flesh and fish or iron tools and machinery. During the regime of Maharaja Yudhisthira, all over the world, there were regulated rainfalls. That's extremely important. In other words, when there's a pious king like Maharaj Yudhisthira, or Lord Rama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it usually rains at night and it's sunny during the day. And believe me, that is the ideal formula to grow crops. Rain at night and sunny during the day. Rainfalls are not in the control of the human being. The heavenly king Indradeva is the controller of rains, and he's the servant of the Lord. When the Lord is obeyed by the king and people under the king's administration, there are regulated rains from the horizon, and these rains are the causes of all varieties of production on the land. So there you go. This is real knowledge. This is real agriculture. This is real Krishna consciousness. Not only do regulated rains help ample production of grains and fruits, but when they combine with astronomical influences, there is ample production of valuable stones and pearls. So, now we see the connection between the movement of the planets, including the moon, and the agricultural production, as well as production of precious jewels and stones. Grains and vegetables are can sumptuously feed a man and animals, and a fatty cow delivers enough milk to supply a man sumptuously with vigor and vitality. If there is enough milk, enough grains, enough fruit, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why do the people need cinemas, houses of prostitution, slaughterhouses, etc.? What is the need of an artificial, luxurious life of cinema, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced anything but quarreling, individually and nationally? Now let's talk about that, because we see all this quarreling today. There's an epidemic of it. Everyone's arguing, fighting, beating each other up, killing, abusing, exploiting one another within a family, in business, in politics, in sports. Everything is competitive. Everything is win or lose, and more people, few people win, many people lose. This is a description of what's going on today. And of course, there's war and tragedy. There's drug addiction. There's also violence, severe violence. Okay, so why is this? Well, because the artificial, so-called luxurious life is being promoted. And people are going to the cinema, and all these films that you watch today, they're all about violence and illicit sexual activity and gangsters and money and sharp and nice cars and nice apartments, and people succeeding by cheating, lying, and criminal activity. And then there's police that are going after them, and there's violence, and there's killing, and then some people get charged and have to go to court, and the court finds them guilty. It's horrible. So, has this civilization produced anything but quarreling individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men into a hellish factory and the war fields at the whims of a particular man? Yeah, this United Nations was started to stop wars, have the war stop. No. There's always some war going on today in some part of the world. And therefore, people are suffering terribly. There are hundreds and thousands of films about gunfights, about machine guns, and all kinds of horrible things. And that's called entertainment. That's the movie industry. I don't understand how it could be called entertainment. It's rather how to get the mind disturbed. And that's basically what's happening. People are going to cinemas, and they get all artificially uh, inoculated with nonsense, seeing murders, seeing all kinds of violence and sense gratification glorified and so forth. Okay, so, yeah, Prabhupada is saying, thousands and thousands of people have to work in factories and in companies, and so many wars are being declared, and young men have to go, and young women have to go and fight these wars. And in such a civilization of luxurious life of cinemas, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels, it simply produced quarreling individually and nationally. That's all. It is said here that the cows used to moisten the pasturing land with milk because their milk bags were fatty and the animals were joyful. Do they not require, therefore, proper protection for a joyful life by being fed with a sufficient quantity of grass in the field? Well, if you see the modern cow farm or the animal farm with pigs and sheep, they're exploiting these poor animals and keeping them oftentimes cooped up in barns and fed and then milked 3 times a day. So how long do you think a cow can last living like that, always staying in these industrial barns and being milked 3 times a day? They can be productive for about 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, and then they're sent to the slaughterhouse, sold for meat. So it's a horrible situation. Why should men kill cows for their selfish purposes? Why should man not be satisfied with grains, fruits, and milk, which combined together can produce hundreds and thousands of palatable dishes? Why are there slaughterhouses all over the world to kill innocent animals? Maharaj Parikshit's grandson, Maharaj Parikshit, grandson of Maharaj Yudhisthira, while touring his vast kingdom, saw a black man attempting to kill a cow. The king at once arrested the butcher and chastised him sufficiently. Should not a king or executive head protect the lives of the poor animals who are unable to defend themselves? Is this humanity? Are not the animals of a country citizens also? Then why are they allowed to be butchered in organized slaughterhouses? Are these the signs of equality, fraternity, and nonviolence? Obviously not. Therefore, in contrast with the modern, advanced, civilized form of government, an autocracy, meaning like a kingship of Maharaj Yudhisthira, is by far superior to the so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast votes for another less than an animal man. There you go. If people are living like animals, eating meat, engaging in sense gratification and so forth, then who do you think they're going to vote for? They're going to vote for someone who's promising them more meat, more sense gratification. And so they end up with these horrible leaders, and the leaders just mislead the people. In fact, yes. So Prabhupada continues, we are all creatures of material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that the Lord himself is the seed-giving Father, and material nature is the mother of all living beings in all shapes. Thus, Mother Material Nature has enough foodstuff both for animals and for men, by the grace of the Father Almighty, Sri Krishna. The human being is the elder brother of all other living beings. He is endowed with intelligence more powerful than animals for realizing the course of nature and the indications of the Almighty Father. Human civilizations should depend on the production of material nature without artificially attempting economic development. To turn the world into a chaos of artificial greed, power only for the purpose of artificial luxuries and sense gratification. This is but the life of dogs and hogs. So here we have a strong message by Srila Prabhupada. And he's basically condemning the use of human intelligence for a wanton life of exaggerated sense gratification. And when people increase their wealth and power, they become more and more greedy, and they think that they can get away with so many different abusive types of behavior because of their greed and because of their power and their wealth. So Prabhupada says this is the life of dogs and hogs, not of real civilized persons. Okay. So it all starts whenever there's degradation of the quality of leaders and leaders who permit all kinds of promiscuous activities in society, intoxication, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and so forth. Then there is gradual decline of Brahminical culture, and one goes on a slippery slope toward animal life, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending with no respect for God, no respect for other human beings, just this survival of the fittest jungle mentality. The big fish eats the little fish, the big bear eats the little guy, and so forth. So in order to stop this downward spiral, it's incumbent on true devotees to spread the message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam. And it begins with showing respect and protection of cows and bulls. That's the beginning of Brahminical culture, of this sama, this equilibrium of the mind, or peacefulness, and dhamma, self-control, and tapa is austerity, and socham, cleanliness internally and externally, cleaning the mind and the senses of lusty and ignorant behavior, and coming up or elevating one to the mode, at least the mode of goodness, without any tinge of passion and ignorance. And then there's theoretical knowledge and then realized knowledge, jnana and vijnana. Realized knowledge is you're able to put the theory into practice and get practical results. So if people take to protecting cows and protecting bulls, then they get this pure milk, and by drinking pure milk or ahimsa milk, the finer gray matter in the brain is evolving at that point, and one can understand higher order philosophical and spiritual concepts. Right now, if someone has their baseball hat on backwards, drinking a Budweiser and eating a hot dog and watching the Super Bowl, they're not so interested in higher order spiritual knowledge. They're so grossly violating their own body with such horrible substances, and instead of having evolved gray matter in the brain, they fill the brain with dung and urine, and thus their philosophy, their poetry, their music, their cinemas, their culture is all on the level of cats and dogs, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. No concept of the soul and its eternal relationship with God. So such a culture is condemned. And therefore, Prabhupada continues here. He says that, therefore, in contrast with the modern, advanced, civilized form of government, an autocracy like Maharaj Yudhishthira's is by far superior to the so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast votes for another less than animal man. We are all creatures of material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that the Lord himself is the seed-giving father, and material nature is the mother of all living beings in all shapes. Thus, Mother Material Nature has enough foodstuff both for the animals and for men, or for human beings, by the grace of the Father Almighty Sri Krishna. The human being is the elder brother of all the living beings. He is endowed with intelligence more powerful than animals for realizing the course of nature and the indications of the Almighty Father. Human civilization should depend on the production of material nature without artificially attempting economic development to turn the world into a chaos of artificial greed and power only for the purpose of artificial luxuries and sense gratification. This is but the life of dogs and hogs. So, very eloquent words by Srila Prabhupada. Now we'll continue a little bit more about cows and bulls. And we'll go to 1st Canto, 17th chapter, 9th verse. And here, Srila Prabhupada writes, and he says, O son of Sarabi, this is Srimad Bhagvatam, and O son of Sarabi, you need lament no longer now. There is no need to fear this low-class Sudra. And, O mother cow, as long as I am living as the ruler and subduer of all envious men, there is no cause for you to cry, everything will be good for you. So this is a verse from the 17th chapter of the 1st canto, in which Maharaj Parikshit finds a bull and cow, and both of them have been injured by a unworthy person, and he's beaten both of them. And the bull has only one leg to stand on; the other three have been broken. So those 4 legs of the bull represent Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma means following religious principles, and Artha means economic development, and Dharma, Artha, Kama means sense gratification, and Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha means liberation. So and they also further represents the 4 universal principles of spirituality, which are mercy, cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. Mercifulness, cleanliness, and austerity, and truthfulness. So, only one leg is remaining of the bull, and that is truthfulness. And that is also being beaten, where the mercy is non-existent, austerity is non-existent, cleanliness is non-existent. There's just a little bit of truthfulness remaining in this age of Kali Yuga. So when the king saw the behavior of the personality of Kali, who had broken those 3 legs of the bull and now is trying to break the last leg, and Mother Cow has tears in her eyes and is suffering, seeing this horrendous behavior, Maharaj Parikshit became very upset, and he was going to kill the personality of Kali. So Prabhupada writes here, and now you're hearing the questioning of Maharaj Parikshit to the bull. O son of Sarabi, you need not lament no longer now. There is no need to fear this low-class Sudra. And, O mother cow, as long as I am living as the ruler and subduer of all envious men, there is no cause for you to cry. Everything will be good for you. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, protection of bulls and cows and all other animals can be possible only when there is a state ruled by an executive head like Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit addresses the cow as mother, for he is a cultured, twice-born Kshatriya king. That means he has seminal birth, and now also he's been initiated and has become a disciple. So, and he's coming from an illustrious family. His grandfathers are the Pandavas themselves, and Yudhisthira and Arjuna, Bhima, Sahadev, and so forth. So, Surabi is the name of the cows which exist in the spiritual planets and are especially reared or cared for by Lord Sri Krishna himself. As men are made after the form and features of the Supreme Lord, so also the cows are made after the form and features of the Surabi cows in the spiritual kingdom. In the material world, the human society gives all protection to the human being, but there is no law to protect the descendants of Surabi, who can give all protection to men by supplying the miracle food, milk. But Maharaj Parikshit and the Pandavas were fully conscious of the importance of the cow and bull, and they were prepared to punish the cow killer with all chastisement, including death. There has sometimes been agitation for the protection of the cow, but for want of pious executive heads and suitable laws, the cow and the bull are not given protection. The human society should recognize the importance of the cow and the bull and thus give all protection to these important animals. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit, for protecting cows in Brahminical culture, the Lord, who is very kind to the cows and the Brahmanas, Go Brahmana Hitaya, will be pleased with us and will bestow upon us real peace. Okay, so your second homework is explain why the cow and the bull are so important for the peace and prosperity of human society. So you can refer to 117.9, 112.34, 116.18, and also we read from 1:14:34. Let me go back to that. 1:14:34. Okay, you can forget about 1:13:34, but 1:16:17 and 18, 1:12:34, 1:17:9, and in first canto, 4th chapter, 9th verse, Prabhupada says something very important. He says, 1:4:9. Okay. In that verse, he says, in the purport, 1st canto, 4th chapter, 9th verse, he says, to kill cows means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death. So he's talking about Maharaj Parikshit and how he protected the cow and the bull. We've been reading about that in the 17th chapter. But he says, and this is a very significant statement, to kill cows means to end human civilization. And so that's part of your homework is, why is it so important to protect the cow and the bull? And secondly, why, by killing cows and eating them and bulls, one could end human civilization? This all has to do with the modes of material nature. And then 1:17:3, and this will be the last verse, 117.3 says, although the cow is beneficial because one can draw religious principles from her, she was now rendered poor and calfless. Her legs were being beaten by a Sudra. There were tears in her eyes, and she was distressed and weak. She was hankering after some grass in the field. The next symptom of the age of Kali is the distressed condition of the cow. Milking the cow means drawing the principles of religion in a liquid form. The great rishis and munis would live only on milk. Srila Sukadeva Goswami would go to a householder while he was milking a cow, and he would simply take a little quantity of it for subsistence. Even 50 years ago, no one would deprive a sadhu of a quart or two of milk, and every householder would give milk like water. For a Sanatanist, or a follower of Vedic principles, it is the duty of every householder to have cows. Notice that. It is the duty of every householder to have cows and bulls as household paraphernalia, not only for drinking milk, but also for deriving religious principles. The Sanatanist, or a householder who follows Vedic principles, worships cows on religious principles and respects Brahmanas. The cow's milk is required for the sacrificial fire, because you make ghee from it, and by performing sacrifices, the householder can be happy. The cow's calf not only is beautiful to look at, but also gives satisfaction to the cow, and so she delivers as much milk as possible. But in the Kali Yuga, the calves are separated from the cows as early as possible for purposes which may not be mentioned in these pages of Srimad Bhagvatam. The cow stands with tears in her eyes. The Sudra milkman draws milk from the cow artificially, and when there is no milk, the cow is sent to be slaughtered. These greatly sinful acts are responsible for all the troubles in the present society. People do not know what they are doing in the name of economic development. The influence of Kali will keep them in the darkness of ignorance. Despite all endeavors for peace and prosperity, they must try to see the cows and the bulls happy in all respects. Foolish people do not know how one earns happiness by making the cows and bulls happy. But it is a fact, by the law of nature, it's the law of nature. If you keep the cows and bulls happy, then people will be happy. Let us take it from authority of Srimad Bhagavatam and adopt the principles for total happiness of humanity. Okay, I think you have enough references now to do your homework. And question 1 is explain the difference between a Brahmana and a Vaishnava. And number 2, why are cows and bulls so important? Why are protection of cows and bulls so important? Okay? Are there any questions? So you have references 1, 16, 18, 17 and 18, 1, 12, 34, and 35, I think. 117.9, 117.3. And for a little extra credit, you can read Bhagavad Gita 14.16. 14.16. And also what else did we read? We read no, that's it. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. Okay, how many people listening? Also, at 2 o'clock today, we're going to have a demonstration of how to make the goodness cookie. Everyone's invited to come. Okay, that's good. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol.